Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. I'm Nena Bardwaj. Michael Russell, the Cabinet Secretary for Government, Business and Constitutional Relations, will be in Paris for France's largest business conference, MEDEF. Mr Russell addressed the 3,000 business representatives and told them that the Scottish Government wants to remain within the EU, or if this is not possible, within the Single Market and Customs Union. Speaking after French PM Edouard Philippe, he repeated that the Scottish Government was working to strengthen links with the EU and EU countries, despite Brexit, and that Scotland is a natural partner for French businesses and a natural destination for French visitors. The Cabinet Secretary said French businesses employ over 20,000 people in Scotland, and the 10,000 French citizens currently living in Scotland contribute hugely to our economy, culture and society. Scotland voted to remain inside the European Union by 62 to 38%. Every local authority area in Scotland voted to remain. We believe Brexit will be deeply damaging. This is why, short of remaining in the EU, our position is that the UK should remain in the customs union and single market, a market which is around 8 times bigger than the UK market alone. Meanwhile, SNP Foreign Affairs spokesperson Stephen Gethins has renewed calls for the UK government to rule out a no-deal Brexit. The call comes after Theresa May said today that a no-deal Brexit wouldn't be the end of the world. The MP for North East Fife said the Prime Minister was being reckless in the extreme, as the UK government's own analysis suggests that this would hit Scottish GDP by up to 9%, costing around £12.7 billion a year, the equivalent of £2,300 per person, and around 80,000 jobs. The Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, has announced enhancements in the way children and young people are assessed at schools throughout Scotland. The announcements come after the Scottish Government published a review of the first year of standardised assessments, which take place in primaries 1, 4 and 7 and the third year of secondary school, to help teachers judge progress on a child's learning. The improvements will allow for a better experience for both pupils and teachers, with the majority of changes being made in primary 1 assessments, which will now have questions changed to more familiar contexts, while retaining the same level of difficulty, and will be assessed by a forum of teachers and professional groups. Other assessment stages will also see teachers provided with training packages, which will include case studies, video hints and tips for successful classroom management, and for pupils the opportunity to provide feedback. Deputy First Minister John Swinney said standardised assessments provide constant evidence for teachers to identify the next step in a child's learning, which is especially valuable in the early years if we are to continue to close the attainment gap. The UK will use its international aid budget to boost its own interest, whilst also seeking to deepen trades with Africa, Prime Minister Theresa May has announced during her first official trip to the continent. During a speech in Cape Town, she said that she wanted Britain to become the biggest investor in Africa out of the group of 7 nations, overtaking the United States by controversially using the aid budget to help British companies invest there. The government has held out the prospect of increased trade with non-EU countries as one of the major selling points of Brexit, as the country prepares to leave the Union in March next year. May is also due to visit Nigeria and Kenya. The number of young people in Scotland in education, training or employment has reached a record high. 91.8% of all 16 to 19-year-olds are now in education, training or employment, whilst the number of young people not currently in them fell to 3.4%. The figures also reveal that 87.1% of young people from ethnic minority groups were now participating in education, 15.8% higher than the UK average. They also found that the participation gap for those from the 20% of most deprived areas and 20% of the most affluent areas has also continued to narrow, from 11.5% in 2017 to 10.8% in 2018. Minister for Business, Fair Work and Skills Jamie Hepburn said, as well as achieving our target to reduce unemployment by 4 years ahead of schedule, we exceeded that annual target of 27,000 modern apprenticeship opportunities between 2017 and 2018. And carers are due to receive the first payments of the new Carers Allowance Supplement from mid-September. The due benefit will be paid twice a year by Social Security Scotland, the first major new public service to be created since devolution. Carers will receive an additional payment of £221, the equivalent of £8.50 a week. a 13% increase from the previous carers allowance from the Department of Work and Pensions. Cabinet Secretary for Social Security, Shirley Ann Somerville, said, "We have always made clear that we believe carers allowance should be the same as job seekers allowance. Having new powers over Social Security means that we can make this a reality, and this additional payment is in recognition of the importance that contribution that carers make to society." The Carers Allowance Supplement is worth over £300 million a year and will benefit over 75,000 carers. British businesses and professional services are currently at their lowest mood since November 2016 as a result of slowing sales growth, fast rising costs and uncertainty surrounding Brexit. The Confederation of British Industry said that its quarterly survey of the service sector saw the mood index go from positive 14 to -4 for firms providing services in areas such as computing, consultancy and telecoms. CBI Chief Economist Ray Newton-Smith said, "The government in Brussels needs to get on with agreeing to a new relationship between the UK and EU that puts people's livelihoods above politics." Official data showed that Britain's services sector stagnated in June and recorded only modest annual growth of 1.5%, with costs rising at the fastest pace since August 2008. People across Scotland continue to rate their hospital experience as highly positive, according to a national survey. 20,000 people answered a range of questions covering topics such as hospital environment, staff and operations in the latest inpatient experience survey. Results showing that a total of 86% rated their experience fully positive, and people were particularly happy about the staff who cared for them. Over a third gave their caregiver full marks, with 91% pleased with the care they received from medical staff, the highest level of staff satisfaction since 2014. Health Secretary Jeane Freeman said NHS investments in staffing are at historically high levels, and the record high inpatient satisfaction rates are a testament to the hard work of our frontline NHS staff. However, meeting the challenges of improving performance and reducing wait times requires the twin approach of investment and reform. £6 million has therefore been invested in reducing wait times. 100% of eligible IVF patients across Scotland began treatment within 12 months of being referred. This is the fourth quarter in a row in which the 90% target has been exceeded. Figures published for the period between April to June 2018 also showed that all patients were screened within 9 months, and 82.6% of them were screened within 6 months at one of the 4 Scottish treatment centres. Minister for Public Health, Joe Fitzpatrick, said, "Over the past 5 years we have invested around £28 million to reduce IVF waiting times and improve the outcome for patients. Scotland continues to lead the way in the provision of IVF treatment." Trains have been delayed and cancelled after an exclusion zone was set up around Ayr Station after contractors found crumbling and exposed roof areas at the adjacent former station hotel. No services are running between Ayr and Girvan, and there is a reduced service between Ayr and Glasgow Central. ScotRail has detailed the changes on its website and has apologised to its customers. Eileen Howitt, Chief Executive of South Ayrshire Council, said, "Unfortunately, we're having to take urgent action to extend the exclusion zone in place at the station, since exposed roof areas present a significant and immediate danger to people and places around it. Our priority right now is to continue to work with Network Rail and ScotRail to keep passengers, staff and the public safe." Further options to deliver devolution of railway policing to Scotland are due to be explored, the Justice Secretary Humza Yousaf has said. The decision follows recent advice from Police Scotland around the practicalities of a number of issues and the timing of implementation, particularly relating to ICT. The Justice Secretary said, "Throughout this process we have been committed to listening to officers and staff. As part of that ongoing approach, I have decided that we will re-examine all options for the devolution of railway policing, with clear governance structures and ensuring accountability to the Scottish Parliament." Police in Edinburgh are appealing for witnesses following a suspicious fire in the Leith area of the city. The incident happened between 12:30 and 5:05 a.m. today at the Guru Nanak Sikh Temple in Sheriff Bray. While no one was injured, the temple's front door sustained fire damage and part of the interior was damaged by the smoke. Inquiries are ongoing and the fire is being treated as deliberate. 22-year-old Gerald Gavin has pled guilty to attempted murder at the High Court in Glasgow today regarding his involvement in a hit-and-run accident where a 14-year-old was seriously injured. Additionally, a 21-year-old man and a number of other youths sustained minor injuries when a car was deliberately driven at them. Detective Inspector Peter Sharp of Greater Glasgow CID said, "This incident which unfolded on Saturday, March 24th, earlier this year in Castlemilk is something which will no doubt stay in the minds of the young victims for a long time. The injuries sustained by the 14-year-old girl were so serious that she required immediate surgery. Thankfully she survived, but the circumstances could have been much, much worse." Police in Ross are appealing for information after a rabbit was found dead in an illegally set snare near Taradale Primary School in the Muir of Ord. It is suspected that the snare was set sometime between Saturday and Monday morning when it was discovered. Constable Stephen Chalmers said the use of snares is the subject of strict legislation and is extremely important that anyone using them does so safely, legally and humanely. Setting a snare like this in a public place is an extremely reckless act. That's all for tonight. Thank you very much for watching and we will see you next time. Good night.